I was just mindlessly scrolling through videos not expecting much, until I saw them. That couple sharing ice cream on the street, looking so blissfully in love, was my husband and his college sweetheart. And the shirt he was wearing? I had just ironed it for him last night. In that moment I didn't hesitate. I've endured this marriage for 40 years but now, it's over. People always underestimate a housewife. But once she wakes up they have no idea how ruthless she can be. It was early Saturday morning when my husband, Dr. Charles Bennett, left for a faculty meeting at the college. Charles always treated the university like it was his second home. As one of the most respected senior professors at Eastbridge College, he never strayed far from academia, not even on weekends. I'd grown used to his early departures and late returns, just as I'd grown used to running this household alone. That morning I mopped the floors 3 times, did the laundry and carefully pressed Charles's shirts and slacks. He was meticulous about his clothes. Everything had to be crisp, flawless. No creases, no wrinkles. For 40 years I'd followed that same routine. Somewhere along the way it stopped feeling like a task and became a part of the marriage itself. By the time I looked up it was already noon. I threw together a quick sandwich and started thinking about what groceries I'd need for the evening. Today was our 40th wedding anniversary. Our son Ryan and his wife Natalie were bringing over our grandson Liam for dinner. Charles couldn't stand the smell of pork. Ryan refused to eat vegetables. Natalie was on another health kick. Low fat, low carb, everything bland. Liam had a seafood allergy. Planning a family dinner always gave me a headache. I nibbled on my lunch while scrolling through Instagram reels, hoping to stumble upon some recipe ideas. That's when a local video caught my eye. A gray-haired couple stood side by side on the sidewalk. The woman held an ice cream cone, laughing as she took a small lick, then gently raised it toward the man's lips. He smiled tenderly, cupping her hand in his own as he leaned in to take a bite, right from the same spot. There was something so intimate, so achingly sweet about the moment. Their hair had silvered, their faces lined with age, but the warmth between them felt tangible, like you could reach through the screen and touch it. The person filming had been just a passerby, yet even they couldn't help murmuring, "God, I hope I find someone to grow old with like that." If I hadn't recognized them, maybe I would have sighed along, touched by the beauty of lifelong love. But I did recognize them. The man was wearing a crisp white shirt and charcoal gray slacks, the exact outfit I'd ironed for him last night. I still had the red welt on my wrist from a burst of steam. The polished black leather shoes on his feet? I'd buffed them with shoe polish just this morning. That man was my husband, Charles Bennett. And the woman feeding him ice cream? Vivian Harper. His college flame. Time had etched fine lines around her eyes, but her beauty hadn't faded. She wore a form-fitting vintage dress that showed off her slender figure. Her poise was effortless, her elegance untouched by age. The video looped again and again. I lost track of time. My vision blurred, and I didn't even realize the tears had started until they splashed onto my apron, smearing a grease stain on the soft curve of my belly. And then, out of nowhere, a thought surfaced. Charles has always been a neat freak. He eats from blue ceramic bowls with dark wooden chopsticks. Drinks only from a clear glass. I, on the other hand, use white porcelain dishes, light utensils, a ceramic mug. And God forbid we ever mix them up. When it was just the two of us at dinner, he would actually use a spatula to draw an imaginary line across the serving dish. A literal boundary. Whatever portion he served himself was his. The rest was mine. Once I accidentally reached over the invisible line. He slammed his cutlery on the table so hard, soup splashed all over my face. Back then we lived in a cramped old apartment, the kind where the stove broke every other week. Still, I cleaned everything up and started cooking again. Only after I'd coaxed him into finishing his meal did I realize the sharp pain twisting through my abdomen. It was just weeks after I'd given birth. And in that moment, as I sat alone, my heart clenched like it was being crushed in a vice. My mouth opened but no air came in. All those memories I'd tried so hard to bury came crashing back like a tidal wave. From the moment I got pregnant and gave birth, Charles and I hadn't shared a bed in 38 years. Kissing? Almost non-existent. On the rare occasions we did have sex, he was cold, mechanical, never tender. Sounds pathetic, I know. I used to believe that's just who Charles Bennett was. Distant, indifferent, emotionally unavailable. I thought it wouldn't have mattered who he married, he'd always be this way. But today I realized I was wrong. Charles could laugh. He could hold someone's hand. He could take a bite from an ice cream cone that another woman had already tasted. Turns out his obsession with cleanliness was only ever meant for me. I don't know if I cried myself to sleep or simply passed out from sheer exhaustion and heartbreak. When I woke up on the couch, it was already 4 in the afternoon. I heard voices coming from Charles's study, low, measured academic tones. I walked to the bathroom, washed my face, then went to the bedroom and changed into the nicest outfit I owned. After that, I headed toward his study. He was on a video call with one of his students discussing something I couldn't begin to understand. Some dense academic theory, no doubt. When he heard the door open, he glanced over his shoulder and in the split second he moved out of frame, gave me a sharp look and gestured subtly for me to leave. I pretended not to notice. I stood perfectly still. Left with no choice, he continued his performance, playing the gentle, devoted professor, patiently guiding his student through whatever intellectual maze they were lost in. I just stood there studying the man I'd lived with for 40 years. His gray hair was slicked back neatly with gel. Thin gold-rimmed glasses rested on his prominent nose. Age had softened his once harsh features, giving him the appearance of refinement, of dignity. But who would believe that this so-called kind and respectable man hadn't even bothered to check on his wife passed out cold on the couch? Charles finally ended the call and closed his laptop, his brows now drawn in a deep scowl. "What are you standing there for? Ryan's coming over for dinner. You know what time it is? You haven't even started cooking. I need to talk to you." I stepped forward, closer to his desk. Maybe I'd been standing too long because my legs gave out a little. I had to grab onto a stack of papers just to steady myself. Charles immediately snapped. "How clumsy can you be? You can't even walk straight. Don't touch my files." He reached out to shove me away, then hesitated, almost like he was repulsed by the idea of touching me. The awkwardness of his gesture would have been laughable if it hadn't been so familiar. That, right there, that was how he'd treated me all these years. I used to endure it. I used to tell myself to stay quiet, to smile through it. But today, for the first time, I truly felt it. That raw, seething thing called rage. "Charles, did you really go to a meeting today?" Color surged into his face in an instant. His voice was sharp, defensive. "You're accusing me? I've worked my ass off for decades. Every weekend I'm in meetings. If I weren't out there working, how else would you sit around this house like a damn parasite?" I looked at his contorted face and suddenly, everything was crystal clear. "Professor Bennett, have you ever thought about how much it would cost to hire a live-in housekeeper on call 24 hours a day? I do work. I just don't get paid for it. Let me remind you, back then I could have gone to college too. I gave up my education so you could finish yours. I dropped out and took 3 jobs just to support you." Charles hadn't expected me to fight back like this. His lips quivered, his posture faltered. "I don't want to argue. There's no point in dredging all this up. Just go cook dinner." But I wasn't going to let it go. Not this time. I pulled out my phone, turned the volume all the way up and held the video right in front of his face. His expression shifted. "Elaine, what's this supposed to mean? I ran into Vivian by chance. What was I supposed to do? People love to make assumptions." I gave a cold laugh. "You mean that spontaneous ice cream coincidence? But Charles, you don't even eat sweets." His eyes darkened. His voice rose until it nearly shook the walls. "You've always been this petty, just like 40 years ago. You never change. I swear to God, nothing happened between me and Vivian. Don't taint our friendship with your twisted suspicions." I suddenly felt bone-deep exhaustion. Was this really the man I'd loved and stood by for 40 years? I walked into the kitchen, grabbed Charles's bowl and his drinking glass and returned to his study. "You've spent our entire marriage separating everything in this house, right down to the dishes we eat from. But with Vivian Harper, you didn't seem to mind sharing a damn ice cream cone." I raised the bowl and the glass and smashed them hard against the floor. Porcelain and glass shards exploded across the hardwood. Charles jumped back in alarm. A shard grazed my cheek. I felt the sting as a drop of blood welled up. I wiped it away with the back of my hand and said quietly, "For 40 years you've refused to eat from my bowl, drink from my cup, no matter how clean I made them. So now I've broken yours. Tonight would you be willing to eat from mine? Drink from my cup? If you dare lie, may you and Vivian rot in hell." Charles froze. He stared at me for a long moment before finally replying, his voice eerily calm. Don't be ridiculous. It's still early. I'll just go buy a new set. I let out a small laugh. A university professor, too afraid of a curse to offer even a single comforting lie to his own wife. Charles despised me, but years ago he married me because he couldn't afford college on his own. Me. I was head over heels in love with him. I knew I wasn't pretty enough for him. I clung to my grades just to feel like I had some worth. I had better test scores than he ever did, but I gave it all up, left school, worked 3 jobs, just so he could finish his degree. For decades I gave him everything. And in return he gave me distance, coldness, revulsion. And now he could hold Vivian's hand and eat from her ice cream cone without flinching. The fire in my heart that had burned for so many years finally went out. We're done, Charles. I walked to the bedroom and began packing in silence, his bitter words still echoing in my ears. You're 60 years old and suddenly think you're some modern woman trying to break up? Please. Who's gonna feed you, clothe you? You're just a housewife. I could hire a cleaner tomorrow who'd do a better job. You think you're worth something? You're old. What man in his right mind would want you? Everyone needs an outlet for their emotions. Charles was always the perfect gentleman in public. But the moment he stepped through our front door he turned sharp, cold, and cutting. To him I was clumsy, slow-witted, plain-looking, and utterly unimpressive in every possible way. But at least I worked hard. I was healthy. I wouldn't starve on the street. And more importantly, I had one irreplaceable lifeline in my world. My wild, irreverent, and endlessly loyal best friend, Samantha Quinn. Meeting her was without a doubt the greatest stroke of luck in my life. Just then my phone buzzed. A voice message. I hit play. Samantha's voice came bursting through, vibrant and unapologetic as ever. Elaine, I just pulled out of the garage. I'll be at your place in 20 minutes. Want me to bring 2 muscleheads to beat the crap out of that old bastard? I couldn't help but laugh. I'll wait for you downstairs. Thanks for taking me in, darling. I finished packing in a flash, zipped up my suitcase and dragged it toward the front door. But just as I reached for the handle it swung open from the outside. There stood Ryan. Behind him were Natalie and little Liam. Ryan snatched the suitcase from my hand, his tone instantly laced with irritation. Mom, seriously? You're too old for this kind of drama. Dad just got home from work, he's exhausted and now you're making a scene? Can't you show him a little compassion? This son I'd raised with my own 2 hands, who'd grown up watching Charles dismiss me with cold words and sharper silences, had clearly learned the same habits. To Ryan, his father was a respected professor, the head of the household, the man who kept everything running. And I? Just a faded housewife. A background figure. He had long forgotten how his father used to bury himself in research and tenure tracks while Ryan was a sickly child in and out of hospitals. It was me, only me, who carried him to appointments, stayed by his side through every fever and sleepless night, held our crumbling home together with bare hands. Natalie gently nudged Ryan's arm, trying to caution him with a look. But Ryan simply shot her a glare. He was through and through his father's son, arrogant, controlling, and beyond redemption. When I didn't respond, his voice rose another notch. Dad already told me, it was just a chance encounter with Ms. Harper. You're seriously blowing this out of proportion. I was right there. She just said the ice cream was good and offered him a taste. Why are you making a federal case out of it? Do you even know how long she's waited for Dad? She never married because of him. That's real love. Instead of sulking and playing the victim, maybe you should try a yoga class, hit a salon or something. Stop living in resentment all the time. And come on, it's not like Dad isn't giving you money. Look at Ms. Harper, same age as you but so graceful, so put together. Her energy's on another level. And honestly, the way you've let yourself go, it's not just Dad who's uncomfortable looking at you. I get nauseous just thinking about it. You're a grandmother now and you're throwing a tantrum about moving out? What do you think the neighbors will say? If my co-workers found out my 60-year-old mother was fighting with her husband like some teenager, they'd laugh their asses off. His words pierced like jagged shards, buzzing in my ears, each one louder and crueler than the last. I glanced down at my stomach. Truth was, my limbs were still slender and my face still held its shape. A classic oval, soft and proportionate. It was just my abdomen that stood out so starkly, protruding in a way I could never quite hide. It started when I was pregnant with Ryan. He was positioned forward in the womb, what doctors call a pendulous belly. The stretch marks were deep and widespread, and my abdominal muscles had torn apart so severely there was a 4-finger-wide separation. Charles was finishing his final semester of college at the time, juggling internships, job interviews, and endless social events with classmates from across the country. I barely got a few days of postpartum rest before I was thrown into the chaos of newborn care, managing his aging parents and running the entire household by myself. As Charles climbed the career ladder and his income improved, he began to see my part-time jobs as a stain on his image. A working wife, in his eyes, was beneath him. That's when I finally gave in and gave everything up, became a full-time housewife. Back then, no one even talked about postpartum recovery. I was barely given time to heal. Because of the lack of rest, I ended up with mild uterine prolapse. It wasn't until years later, when social media boomed, that I found yoga tutorials online and started following recovery workouts on my own. Slowly, little by little, I pieced myself back together. I've known for a long time that my sacrifices held no real value. But I kept numbing myself, pretending it didn't matter. I was done arguing. I yanked the suitcase out of Ryan's hands and walked out the door without looking back. Liam burst into tears behind me, frightened by the sudden eruption of tension. My heart clenched, but I forced myself not to turn around. Then Ryan's voice rang out like a slap. Even without Vivian Harper, my dad would still be in demand. If you walk out that door, don't even think about coming back. My eyes stung. How did that little boy, who used to call me Mommy 100 times a day with his soft baby voice, turn into this? How did the child I raised with every ounce of love become the one holding the knife to my heart? I dragged my suitcase down the stairs. A cherry-red Porsche rolled smoothly to a stop at the curb. The window slid down and there she was, Samantha, her oversized sunglasses catching the porch light, her silver-gray hair glowing like polished metal in the dusk. At our age, dyeing your hair felt pointless. Every strand of silver on her head was a badge of who she was. Bold, untamed, and unapologetically herself. She lifted a hand adorned with chunky gold rings and gave me a dramatic wave. When girlfriends reunite, there's no such thing as problems. Gas tank's full, just say the word. Where are we headed? I couldn't help but smile. Thank God for Samantha. As long as I had her, maybe my life wasn't so hopeless after all. Nowhere special, I said softly. Let's just go to your place first. She lived in a spacious high-rise downtown, nearly 2,000 square feet of light-filled open space that was entirely her own. Independent, peaceful, unapologetically hers. Samantha had never married and she never envied anyone else's so-called domestic bliss. She lived boldly, freely, with more radiance than most people ever dared to dream of. I used to tell her, a woman always needs a man to lean on. She would just laugh and shake her head. Looking back now, it's almost laughable. The joke was on me all along. Samantha ordered a massive takeout spread, burgers, fries, fried chicken, even 2 cups of chocolate ice cream, my grandson's all-time favorites. I stared at the ice cream, my thoughts drifting again. I couldn't stop seeing that video. Charles and Vivian sharing ice cream like teenagers in love. Samantha shoved the cup into my hands and the chill of it snapped me back to reality. This is your favorite flavor. Eat it before it melts. I scooped a huge bite into my mouth. It was so cold it made my brain throb, but strangely for the first time in days my heart didn't hurt anymore. After dinner we cleaned up, then collapsed onto her oversized, impossibly comfortable beanbag couch. We turned on a movie, started talking, and somewhere between laughter and silence we drifted off to sleep. By the time I opened my eyes again, it was deep into the night. I sat on the couch, momentarily disoriented. No chores waiting for me. No breakfast to plan. No errands to run. The night stretched out in front of me, blank and unfamiliar. I didn't even know what to do with myself. Samantha stirred awake shortly after. She glanced at the clock and smirked. Looks like someone's not falling back asleep. She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward her bedroom, stopping in front of her walk-in closet. Pick something to wear, she said with a grin. That tired old outfit of yours? Trash it. It's bringing the whole vibe down. I blinked. At this hour? Where exactly are we going? She raised an eyebrow, lips curling into a mischievous smile. Out, of course. What else is night good for? I hesitated. Come on, we're 2 old women. Going out this late? What if something happens, like a robbery or worse? but Samantha had already tossed a deep purple velvet jumpsuit into my arms. "Stop whining. Put this on. I just bought it, it's perfect for you." Then she grabbed her keys and breezed toward the door. "I'll be waiting in the car." I let out a helpless laugh and shook my head. What could I do? She was already halfway out. I couldn't exactly let her go alone. What I didn't expect was where she was taking me. A nightclub. The moment we pulled up, my stomach dropped. I followed her out of the car, holding tightly onto the corner of her jacket like a lost child. I'd never stepped foot in a place like this before. The moment we walked through the entrance, a young man, clearly the bar manager, hurried over, beaming from ear to ear. "Miss Quinn. Haven't seen you in days." "Same as usual, VIP suite upstairs." Samantha tossed him her car keys without missing a beat. "Of course. Park and wash the car and send up a few charmers while you're at it." I followed her past the thumping bass of the bar area, up a staircase lined with staff who all greeted her like she owned the place. My heart was pounding. My blood pressure must have been sky high. "What are we even doing here?" I whispered. "I can't sing, I can't dance, and I definitely don't drink." Samantha clapped me on the shoulder, laughing loud and carefree. "Sweetheart," she said, "when you're with me, someone else will do the singing, someone else will do the dancing, someone else will drink the damn cocktails. All you have to do," she winked, "is have fun." We were still talking when the door to the suite swung open. The manager returned, leading in a group of young men, tall, stylish, in their 20s or early 30s. Each one looked like he'd just stepped off a fashion runway. "Miss Quinn," the manager grinned, "here's the best selection in the house. You and your friend take your pick." Samantha waved him off with a flick of her wrist. "Thanks, you can go now." As soon as the door clicked shut, it was like a signal had been given. The young men moved in smoothly, half toward her, half toward me. One with a boyish smile stood behind me and gently started massaging my shoulders. Another sat beside me, offering a tray of sliced fruit. A third approached with a glass of champagne, leaning in slightly and asking politely if I'd like a drink. And the last one, the boldest of the bunch, lifted his t-shirt just enough to reveal a sculpted chest, flashing a mischievous grin. "Hey gorgeous, wanna feel how fast my heart's racing? Oh my god, this world has gone completely mad. Who calls a woman my age gorgeous?" I was probably older than his mother. I sat there frozen, unsure where to look, my hands awkward in my lap. Samantha was doubled over, laughing at the sheer panic on my face. She handed me a glass of red wine and clinked it gently against mine. "Elaine, are you having fun? Because if you're happy, then it's all worth it. This life, it's ours. It's meant to be lived for ourselves." In that moment, I felt like I was seeing the Samantha I had first met years ago. Wild, untamed, fiercely independent. The same woman who once shoved her cheating fiancé into a lake, broke off the engagement and built an empire from scratch. A woman who turned heartbreak into fortune. I took a long sip of the wine. Then came the warmth, the flush of freedom spreading through me. I hadn't felt this alive in years. God, it felt good. I ended up staying at Samantha's place. It was supposed to be temporary, but deep down I already knew. I'd taken that first step and I wasn't planning to go back. The morning after we got back from the club, I called a lawyer. The divorce papers were sent to Charles that same day. He didn't respond, not a single word. But I wasn't in any rush. I figured I'd give him a few days to sit with it, let the reality sink in. Instead, it was Ryan who called. This time his tone was noticeably softer. "Mom, don't you think it's time to let this go? Don't you miss Liam?" I let out a cold laugh. "Don't forget, you're the one who told me that once I walked out of that house, I shouldn't bother coming back." He tried coaxing me for a while, but when he realized I wasn't budging, his voice turned sharp again. "What's with this divorce agreement? Why should you get a share of Dad's house and savings? You planning to take our money and shack up with some old guy?" I didn't even flinch. I stayed calm. Believe me, I've been more than generous. I could have taken everything. 40 years of marriage gives me that right. But I didn't. I gave your father a chance to save face. Or, I added coolly, I could just release that video of him and Vivian and let his precious university deal with the fallout. Let's see who's humiliated then. Ryan's tone snapped, his voice suddenly laced with fury. "You're nothing but a bitter old woman. You'll never have the class Vivian has. Go ahead, keep playing the victim. When Dad finally marries her, you'll regret walking out." I didn't bother replying. I hung up mid-rant. A few days later, Natalie called me in secret. That's when I finally understood why Ryan had suddenly become so desperate to get me back. Turns out Charles's life had completely unraveled without me. I'd taken care of him for 40 years, so thoroughly that he couldn't even pour himself a glass of water. He still changed clothes every day, but now his laundry piled up in the washroom untouched and reeking. With no one to cook, he started ordering takeout from the diner downstairs. After meals, the containers just sat there, cluttering the dining table, the mess growing by the day. At first, Ryan told Natalie to help clean up for his father. But Ryan never lifted a finger at home, and Natalie was already stretched thin trying to juggle everything. She simply couldn't manage Charles's disaster zone on top of it. Eventually, Ryan hired a housekeeper through an agency to care for his dad. But things took a turn. The woman, somewhere in her 40s, took one look at Charles, saw a professor with a solid pension and savings, and decided she wanted in. One day, Charles got invited to give a guest lecture out of town. Ryan stopped by to help him pack. He opened the bedroom door and froze. The housekeeper was sprawled out across Charles's bed. At first, Ryan thought she was just being lazy and rushed over to yank off the covers, only to be greeted with a full frontal shock. She wasn't wearing a single thing. I burst out laughing when Natalie told me. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. It sounded like something from a ridiculous soap opera. Only now none of it had anything to do with me. Ryan lost his mind. He called the agency immediately and fired her on the spot. And once again Ryan called to beg me to come home. I simply thanked Natalie for telling me the truth and said I'd drop by to see Liam in a few days. But I wouldn't be stepping foot back into that house. Charles and Ryan had made it perfectly clear. In their eyes, I was never really a wife, never truly a mother, just the most convenient, unpaid housekeeper they ever had. The next time I saw Charles Bennett was outside the family courthouse. I wore jeans and a beige hoodie, my hair freshly dyed a deep chestnut brown. Simple, casual, but I felt more radiant than I had in years. Charles, on the other hand, was dressed in his usual old-school academic style. Only this time his white shirt was wrinkled, the collar limp, sleeves misaligned. He never would have walked out the door like that before. I didn't mock him. There was no point anymore. I just hoped the paperwork would go quickly. I had a yoga session with Samantha that afternoon. When Charles saw me, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. "Elaine, you've lost weight. What? Can't afford to eat now that you've left me." I rolled my eyes. "The weight loss is from a thermage treatment. The glow is good tailoring. Neither has anything to do with you. Men, whether they're 16 or 60, never run short on ego." What did catch me off guard was that Charles didn't lash out. Instead, he looked at me with a painfully forced tenderness. "Elaine, do we really have to go through with this? We've been married 40 years. We're like left and right hands. You know I'm not good with words, but I've never done anything truly wrong to you. Vivian and I, it was just reminiscing, that's all." I looked him straight in the eye, calm and clear. "Charles, it's obvious you're not doing well. But the truth is, I am." He looked like he had more to say, but just then a voice called out, "Charles." I turned. Vivian had just stepped out of a cab, wearing a sharply tailored suit and a silk scarf draped delicately around her neck. Despite her age, she carried herself with the same polished poise, graceful, composed, and perfectly accessorized. She approached us with a soft smile, as if this awkward scene was the most natural thing in the world. Charles looked flustered, rushing to explain. "Vivian came to support me. She was worried when she heard about the divorce. You know, I've always seen her as a sister." I laughed under my breath. "That sounds familiar. 38 years ago you said the exact same thing. Are you hesitating to sign the papers, or are you hoping to play that tired old game again? Wife at home, mistress on the side?" Vivian had been Charles's college friend. They'd always kept things just ambiguous enough, insisting it was innocent. Me? I was already pregnant with Ryan back then. For the sake of the baby and Charles's tuition, I forced myself into that marriage and made him cut ties with her. I still remember him yelling at me, furious, "You're just a jealous woman. Vivian and I are just friends, nothing more." From that moment on, he carried that bitterness like a grudge. Vivian was his symbol of youth, his unreachable fantasy. And I was the blemish he couldn't wash off. Never elegant enough, never refined enough, just a stain he had to live with. Vivian stood before me, her tone calm, her posture perfectly measured. Elaine, if I've caused a rift between you and Charles, I'm truly sorry. But please believe me, I never intended to interfere in your marriage. I just couldn't let go of those youthful memories. She tilted her head toward Charles, their eyes meeting in a tender, lingering gaze. I could practically hear her inner monologue. Poor Charles. Trapped in a loveless marriage all these years. Charles, of course, wouldn't dare show an ounce of remorse in front of her. And just as I expected, one gentle glance from Vivian and he snapped back into his condescending tone. Vivian, don't waste your breath. She wouldn't understand our bond, she never did. If divorce is what she wants, I'll be the bigger person and let her go. Charles. Vivian. The two of them cooing at each other right in front of me was enough to make anyone gag. But the real comedy came the moment Vivian laid eyes on the divorce agreement. Her serene expression shattered in an instant. What is this? Why should she get so much of your estate? This is completely unfair, she practically shrieked. I smiled. What I take from this marriage is none of your concern. Or do those cherished memories between you two only survive with a healthy bank balance? That hit a nerve. Vivian's face stiffened. No, Charles, don't get the wrong idea. I'm just worried she's taking advantage of you. You've always been too kind. I don't want her walking away with everything you worked for. Charles nodded gently, his voice dripping with false warmth. I know. You've never cared about money. We built everything from nothing together. You're not the type to be materialistic. I was exhausted by their pathetic little play. Charles, I said, either you sign this agreement today or I'll walk that video straight into your department office. Let's see how the faculty reacts to their esteemed professor pushing his wife out the door just so he can rekindle a new flame. I glanced at Vivian, letting my words settle before I added, slow and deliberate, scratch that, not a new flame. An old one. Just a ghost from 30 years ago crawling back for a second chance. Vivian opened her mouth to snap back but caught herself, still clinging to her poised and elegant image. Her face flushed crimson, her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. The only thing I was truly grateful for in this entire marriage was how well I knew Charles's weaknesses. For a man like him, losing face at the institution he'd devoted his whole life to was worse than death. So yes, I walked out of that courthouse with my divorce certificate, and a solid share of his assets. As we signed the final documents, Charles was still trying to impress Vivian. Don't worry, sweetheart, he said, puffing up his chest. I can still write papers, lead research. Money comes and goes, but I'm the asset here. They walked out shoulder to shoulder, looking smug and self-satisfied. Vivian glanced back at me with a smug little smile. You'll regret this, she said. You just lost an extraordinary man. I smiled right back and replied coolly, he's 60. If he can still be called a man, it's probably thanks to medication. But hey, if you're happy to take the leftovers I tossed out, be my guest. They were too stunned to speak, just stood there speechless. Life after divorce turned out to be even lighter and more joyful than I'd imagined. Samantha flat out refused to let me move out. She clung to me every day like a gleeful partner in crime. I still woke up early, but not to cook breakfast or iron shirts. Now I started my mornings with a glass of water and half an hour of yoga in the sunlight. I watered the plants, brewed tea, curled up in a rocking chair on the balcony with a book, and waited for Samantha to wake up so we could grab breakfast at the little diner on the corner. We even talked about adopting a dog and a cat, just the two of us, building our own version of a free-spirited senior commune. Suddenly, my days were filled with things to look forward to. Charles's days, on the other hand, steadily fell into chaos. He and Vivian quietly registered their marriage. Ryan, of course, was thrilled. He privately told Natalie, sure, my mom took half of Dad's assets, but she's too old to have more kids. When she dies, it'll all come back to me anyway. Besides, Dad marrying Vivian is a good thing, she's childless. Who knows, maybe she'll even help me out financially. I mean, she's living off my dad's money now. She'll have to stay on my good side. When Natalie told me this, I reminded her to be careful, to protect their own finances. Vivian didn't look like someone who married for love. Her whole demeanor screamed status and money. Only Charles and Ryan could still believe in some sappy fantasy of unforgettable first love after 40 years. As time went on, Charles's life turned into a comedy show that Samantha and I giggled over during afternoon tea. Their first real fight, over Charles peeing standing up and splashing the toilet seat. Vivian was furious, told him he had to sit down from now on, or at least aim better. Charles exploded. I'm a man. Sitting to pee makes me no different from a woman. Vivian wasn't having it. She snapped right back. Then maybe take something for your prostate so you stop dribbling like a broken faucet. And she didn't say this in private. She said it during a family dinner in front of Ryan and Natalie. Whatever shred of authority Charles thought he had was completely crushed. Vivian didn't do any housework. She sent her clothes to the dry cleaner, demanded restaurant meals every night, and hired cleaning services every couple of days. Charles's nearly $20,000 monthly salary vanished like water down a drain. I sometimes wondered, after dealing with all the petty arguments and household mess, if Charles still saw his perfect lover the same way. The first time Ryan reached out after the divorce was 2 days into a road trip I'd taken with Samantha. His voice was frantic on the phone. Mom, Dad's in the hospital. He was attacked. It's serious. Can you come see him? Just for old time's sake. I raised an eyebrow. Isn't that Vivian's job now? She's the wife after all. There was a pause, then I heard Natalie shout in the background. It was Vivian's ex-husband and her son who attacked him. I froze. Wait, what? The same Vivian who'd claimed to love only Charles her whole life, had a husband? And a son? So much for that lifelong, undying love. Fine, I said. Send me the hospital address. I'll go. Then I hung up. The second I put down the phone, I turned to Samantha and spilled the whole story. She laughed so hard she was wiping tears away but still managed to say, dead serious, girl, you absolutely have to go see this. You cannot miss this golden fallen from grace moment. I laughed too, then turned the car around and ended our trip early, because yes, some train wrecks are just too delicious to watch from a distance. Before heading to the hospital, I called Natalie to confirm the room number, and to ask what the hell had actually happened. What she told me was beyond anything I'd imagined. Turns out, Vivian hadn't just been married before, she'd been married multiple times. And each relationship was more chaotic than the last. Her most recent husband was a walking disaster. Drinking, gambling, brawling. The full set. Tired of that mess, Vivian set her sights on Charles, a university professor with savings, status, and a steady pension. In her eyes, he was a walking retirement fund. She sweet-talked her husband into a divorce, promising him, once I secure Charles's assets, we'll get back together. And for a while it worked. She moved in with Charles, played the perfect companion, cut all contact with her ex. But of course, people like her ex will not just disappear. Her ex didn't take the betrayal quietly. He showed up at Charles's college with their biological son in tow, and went on a full-blown rampage. Right in front of the lecture hall, he pointed at Charles's face and yelled, "You think you're some noble professor? You're nothing but a homewrecker." Then he threw a punch. And another. Beat Charles so badly he ended up bruised, bleeding, and utterly humiliated, in front of his students no less. For a man who built his entire identity around respectability and reputation, it was a fatal blow. He collapsed on the spot. By the time I arrived at the hospital, Charles had just regained consciousness. He lifted his hand weakly and murmured, "Vivian, can you get me a glass of water?" I sighed. Then got him the water anyway. He took a sip, blinking slowly, confused. It took a few seconds before his gaze focused on me. And then just like that his face shifted. Shame, awkwardness, regret, desperation, all flashing across his expression before settling into a dull, lifeless gray. "Elaine," he croaked. "I made a mistake. I really did. Can we go back to how things used to be?" I smiled faintly. "If you'd asked me that a little earlier." His eyes lit up, clinging to hope. "I would have slapped you across the face to wake you up," I said, smiling sweetly. "But now, I'm afraid one slap might kill you, and I'm not in the mood to be charged with murder." He was stunned, speechless, eyes dropping to the floor. "You weren't like this before," he muttered, voice trembling. "You never yelled at me. You used to do everything I said. Was I really not like this before? I used to be sharp-tongued and bold, clear about what I loved and what I hated. That's the woman who first became friends with Samantha. Two souls drawn to each other because neither of us liked playing small. I used to love fiercely, give everything to the one I chose. But I chose wrong. Decades of silent endurance dulled me down. Even my sharpest edges wore smooth. I became timid, hesitant, rehearsing every sentence in my head before speaking, just to avoid triggering him. But that wasn't who I was. That was the role women of my generation were taught to play. Be soft, be quiet, be agreeable. Charles kept rambling, crying, unraveling like a man unhinged. I pressed the call button for the nurse, and walked away without looking back. Later, Ryan called me repeatedly. All for the same reason, begging for help. Vivian, it turned out, was doing nothing for the man in the hospital bed, but still spending his money like a full-time job. The worst part, her ex-husband and her son had moved into Charles's house. If it weren't for the bruises Vivian occasionally tried to cover, they almost looked like one big, twisted, happy family. Ryan tried to kick them out, but Vivian's ex wasn't some pushover. Ryan was no match. The man even made a bold offer. You want Vivian to divorce him? Fine, have Charles hand over everything and walk out penniless. And Charles? His job was long gone. What little savings he had left were draining fast. He couldn't even afford a nurse anymore. Of course Ryan wouldn't agree to any of that. Now he was drowning in the mess, snapping at everyone, bringing his frustration home. Natalie started visiting me with Liam, and I could sense something shifting in her. A quiet heaviness, a weight in her voice. I knew what it was. He was thinking about divorce. Maybe that's for the best. At least she still has time. She's young. She has a chance to get out before she's trapped in a marriage that drains her life away. And I don't want Liam growing up learning how to treat women from someone like Ryan. I wasted 40 years on a man who never deserved me. Time doesn't rewind. What's lost can't be reclaimed. But still I hope that every woman in this world finds the courage to love, and to be loved deeply and wholly. And when love is gone, that she knows when to walk away. To never chain herself to someone's indifference. Let my life be a mirror, and may yours never have to reflect mine.
I always thought she couldn't live without me. I always believed Elaine would stay by my side for the rest of my life. She was so quiet. In 40 years of marriage, she never truly raised her voice at me. Even when she got upset, it was just a few soft complaints. Then she'd go right back to ironing my shirts and cooking my dinner. To me, she was just a housewife, a woman who gave up everything for her family, a woman without an identity of her own. Her entire world revolved around me and our son. I never imagined she'd leave. I didn't even think she was capable of leaving. What I felt for her wasn't love, not really. It was habit, familiarity. But the truth is, the woman I dismissed for 40 years turned out to be the stronger one all along. At first, I just thought something was off. She started speaking with more purpose, stopped agreeing to everything without question. She changed her hairstyle, dyed her hair, and began dressing with a crisp, confident edge. I thought it was just a phase. Until the day she handed me those divorce papers. That's when I realized Elaine had changed. And it wasn't temporary. I was furious. Shocked. I even thought she'd lost her mind. I was her husband, the head of the household. How dare she talk about divorce? What had she ever done to earn a share of my assets? But her eyes that day, calm, clear, resolute, told me this wasn't an argument. It was a declaration. I tried to stop her. Tried to talk sense into her, saying things like, "We're too old for this kind of drama." I even pulled out old photographs from our younger days, hoping to stir something in her heart. But all she said was, "Charles, I'm done pretending." And in that moment, I realized something I'd never fully understood. In her heart, I no longer meant anything at all. After the divorce, I told myself I'd walked away with dignity. At least I still had Vivian. Vivian was elegant, polished, refined. At first, anyway. But life has a way of peeling back the facade. She had high standards. Every surface had to be professionally cleaned. Every meal had to come from a high-end restaurant. Every article of clothing had to be dry cleaned. She didn't touch housework. Not even the hand soap got refilled unless I did it myself. Our first fight was over the toilet. I'd left the seat messy. She told me from now on, I should sit down to pee. I snapped, "I'm a man." She snapped right back, "Then learn to aim, or take something for your prostate." She said it in front of my son and daughter-in-law. The shame I felt in that moment was worse than when I failed to get my scholarship all those years ago. When I landed in the hospital, the only person I wanted to see was Elaine. She came. She stood by the bed, still and composed, eyes cold and distant. That was when I truly understood she was gone. I begged her to come back. She smiled. "If you'd begged me earlier," she said, "maybe I would have slapped you awake. But now, I'm afraid one slap might kill you, and I'm not interested in a murder charge." After she left, I cried. For the first time in 40 years, I truly cried. I never really understood Elaine. She wasn't weak, she was gentle. She didn't stay because she couldn't leave, she stayed because she chose to. But I spent 40 years grinding her spirit down, until there was nothing left to give. And when she walked away, she took with her the woman who had once loved me without conditions. What she left behind was a mess I couldn't clean up. Vivian was never home, not really. Not in the way I thought she'd be. All she brought into my life was her ex-husband, her son, and her schemes. I became her personal ATM, lonely, used, and pathetic. Do I regret it? Of course I do. But the cruelest part of regret is knowing she'll never look back. Elaine is living better than she ever has. And I have nothing left but memories and an endless, bitter kind of sorrow.